So we will continue from where we left yesterday. So we talked about SQL Server yesterday, and today we will see what SSIS does in business intelligence world. So as we talked yesterday, integration services is used for transformation. So for doing extraction, transformation, and loading process, we use SSIS on the tasks available in SSIS to do that activity. So data cleaning also part of transformation. So extraction is extract ETL. It's called ETL. Nowadays we are calling it as ELT. ELT stands for extraction, loading, and transformation. So it's basically a concept. Extraction, transformation, and loading. When we do ETL, we first extract the data from source into our warehouse to a staging area, and then do the transformation. Do the transformation means we do the data cleansing, we apply business rules, and then we load the data into the system in the sense maybe there may be cubes or maybe another database system. Whereas in ELT stands for extraction, loading, and transformation. So what they do, they say is first extract the data from source into your staging, and then do the loading. Don't do the transformation after loading into staging. First do the loading and then do the transformation while presenting the data to the user. So if you do ELT, the users will get a near real time data, whereas in ETL process there is a latency. So because you need to transform the data before loading it into users tools. So that is the difference between ETL and ELT. Especially ELT term is used mostly in big data applications. In big data applications, we basically extract the data and we load it into the system first. So instead of doing transformation, first we load it into the system and we apply the business rules while we pull the data or while we render the data to the user. That is ELT. Okay, but for most of the warehouse systems we use ETL. ETL means first we extract the data into staging, then transform the data. That means cleanse the data, apply business rules, and if there are any aggregations, do the aggregations, and then load into the the uh, end user tools. Okay. So integration service, SQL Server integration services runs by integration services service. If you look at SQL Server configuration manager, you will see SQL Server integration services as one of the services. So for example, if I open my configuration manager, so this is the SQL Server configuration manager. When we install SQL Server, we get this configuration manager in which we can see the services. So one of the services here is the integration services. Integration services. So that is the one is used to run the integration services. Okay. And integration services was started in SQL Server 2005. Before SQL 2005 we had something called data transformation services, which is also known as DTS. But later in 2005 integration services was introduced and there were many enhancements done since 2005. Okay, so how does SSIS works? SSIS provides something called tasks. So to perform an activity while doing your extraction, transformation, and load, we need to perform certain activities, right? Pulling the data from source, then applying business logic, those things. So to do those activities, integration services provides different tasks. For example, here I have mentioned execute SQL task. Execute SQL task is used to basically execute a SQL query or SQL statement, whereas send mail task is used to send the emails. So if there is any need to send emails through while loading data, let's say your job fails, you want to send a notification. So to send a notifications, we use send mail task. Like that, there are multiple different tasks available within SSIS that are used to basically perform different activities. Also, SSIS supports C# as well. That C# in the sense .NET library. That means we can extend integration services. If let's say you have better knowledge of .NET or C#, you are a master in C#, then you can extend integration services to call external libraries. So SSIS by default provides certain tasks. Let's say you want to do something additional which is not available in SSIS. So you can make use of .NET libraries and call .NET libraries within SSIS to perform those additional activities. Okay. Then some of the features SSIS provides. So SSIS is can connect to many number of sources to get the data. That means we can use SSIS to connect to SQL Server, Oracle, text files, Excel files, various n number of sources. And complete ETL engine can be built using SSIS. What is an ETL engine? So yesterday we looked at the architecture, right? There is source, there is extraction process, then there is transformation process, and there are multiple components within a warehouse system. So how do we basically move the data to different places, and how do we transform data? All these are different activities, right? These are all performed by something called a platform. So we build a platform that performs all these activities, right? So all the platform can be built using SSIS. And call multiple packages within a package. It's basically multi-threading. SSIS enables multi-threading as well. It supports parameters and variables so that you can create the packages dynamic. That means you can change the values or configurations within the package dynamically. Okay. These are just a high level details. Don't worry about all this. We will talk anyway during those modules. Okay. And SSIS can also be used to perform system maintenance activities. So if you look at little detail in SSIS, SSIS consists of control flow and data flow, something called control flow and data flow. So control flow is um, control flow is basically made up of containers where you basically control the flow. Control the flow means, if you look at this example, we have multiple tasks here. So task, there is one task here and the other task here. So after these two tasks are executed, we basically executing the task that is in this container, right? So this arrow marks you see here are basically control flow. That means after executing this task and finishing this task, we are asking SSIS to execute the third one, right? After once this is done, we want to run the last two tasks in parallel, right? So that is what this arrow mark represents. So we are saying go and execute this task and this task after the third task is complete. So that is what is called control flow. Whereas data flow is basically represents how the data is flowing between the tasks. Okay. Small data flow is smallest units of data flow in a component. Basically data is passed between the components in the data flow. Okay. So that is about SSIS, just a very high level what is SSIS and how it looks like. Okay. Now we will talk a little bit about analysis services. What is analysis services? We talked yesterday. Analysis services is can be considered as a end user end user facing tool where user can query the data. It's a tool that enables users to query the data, like similar to SSRS. SSRS is basically reporting services. Is you build a report, a canned report. That means the structure is not changing, whatever numbers you are showing or whatever you built to show the numbers, that's a final. So user cannot change the structure, so they cannot see any additional data than you are providing in reporting services report. Similarly, analysis services is also one of the mechanisms where we enable users to access the data. Whereas the difference between reporting services and analysis services is not canned. Canned means it is not a fixed structure. So user can change the structure. User can see the data in different perspectives, which is not possible in reporting services. Okay. So analysis services has both multidimensional model and tabular models. So it's basically the how the data is stored within the server and how we build the models. But for the end user, multidimensional model as well as tabular model gives the same experience. Okay. So this is just an illustration of how the cube looks and what a cube is. So a cube by definition consists of dimensions and measures. Dimensions are basically a component within the cube using which you can slice the measure. Measure in the sense, measure is nothing but a fact. So let's say sales data, right? Sales quantity or sales amount. Sales amount is the fact, whereas the geography and date are the dimensions. That means you want to see how much sales I made last week. So last week here is a dimension. So it's basically you are slicing the sales amount by last week or by time, right? That is the slicer. So the time is nothing but a dimension. So you look at the fact, which is the sales amount is the fact, from different dimensionality. One of the dimension we used was the time. Similarly, you can say how much sales were made in US. US is basically a region. So region is a dimension, and we are looking from a dimensionality perspective. For US, what was the sales? So US is nothing but a dimension. So in this example, what I have illustrated here, we have country, right? Country is a dimension and the date is one dimension and product is another dimension. So there are three dimensions using which you can slice the data. So these numbers what you see here, let's say these are sales amounts, right, or dollar amount. This much is the sales. So this whole structure is cube. Okay, and we have three dimensions. Oops. Give me 1 second. Oops, sorry for that. So this is the cube and we have three dimensions: country, product and date. So when I say slice, so let's take that small cube, right? We have just picked a small piece of that cube. So if you look at this cube, that number is 1 million, right? 1 million is the sales amount. So that is 1 million is the sales amount for USA, because this is for the country. Let's say this one is for country USA, right? This slice is for Canada, this slice is for UK. Similarly, we have this one is for shampoo, the first row, second is for cola, third is for milk, toothpaste and soap. And whereas this is the time, January. right? So if you look at the structure in this way, this particular cube, a small cube, 1 million sale, represents USA and for shampoo and for the month of June, right? So that is for the month of June, what was the sales in USA for a product shampoo, right? That is a subset of the cube, which is also called a tuple. So we will talk about tuple later. So question, will there be multiple measures like dimensions? Yes. So let's say you have sales amount, you have order amount, order quantity, sales quantity and inventory. So these three are three different measures, right? So we can use three different measures simultaneously within the cube, and we can compare the numbers. That is the advantage with analysis services. You can have multiple measures and you can compare the numbers side by side. Okay, that we will talk when we discuss about analysis services. But here each piece in within the cube represents again a cube, which is called a tuple. Okay, a tuple is nothing but a subset of the cube that represents a given fact information. Fact in the sense here is the sales amount against the given dimensions. So for this cube we have three dimensions: country, product and date. So this particular small cube is giving me, a small tuple is giving me the numbers for shampoo, June and in the USA. Okay, so that is about the cube. So when we talk about differences between multidimensional and tabular models, again when we said analysis services, in analysis services you can build cube using two models: multidimensional model and tabular model. Tabular model is the new one introduced last before year 2012. Okay, so what are the main differences between multidimensional model and tabular model? In multi-dimensional model you have something called as we discussed, we have dimensions, we have measures and we have something called data source. This we will talk later, but for now we have dimensions and measures. So dimension is nothing but the entity we use to slice the cube, whereas measures is basically gives the fact information. Whereas in the tabular model we have something called tables. We don't have dimensions and measures, we have something called tables. A table gives measures and attributes, so which comprises of all the dimensionality. So the dimensions and measure data is included within a table. So that's why it is easy to build tabular models than multidimensional model, because if you know the SQL, tabular model is nothing but building the model using SQL tables. Okay. So SSAS project life cycle, that means as a developer, when we say we are an SSAS developer, what are the activities involved? Okay, a typical SSAS project goes through the following process. One is you build the dimensions, you build the measures, you build the models, calculations and cubes, etc. You design on your local machine. That means you build the whole structure in or whole model in your local workstation. Then you upload your cube to a server. So once you finish your coding, what you do, you upload your model to the server. Server could be your dev environment or your test environment or production. Okay, you upload the model you built on the local machine to the server, and then we process the data. Processing data means querying the data. When we say process, what happens? Analysis services queries the SQL data and loads the data into the cube. Okay, that is the typical life cycle of SSAS project. First you build the model on your machine, then you upload the model to the server, then you process the data or refresh the cube. Refresh means you get the latest data from SQL into the cube. From there onwards, users will access that cube to see the data. Okay, and cube components, as we talked, cubes consist of dimensions and measures, right? So dimension is basically the axis, and a dimension consists of attributes, hierarchies, levels, members. This we will talk later when we discuss about analysis services. But at high level, dimension consists of these um, components: attributes, hierarchy, levels, members. Okay. Then you have measure groups. Measure groups are nothing but the fact information. Like in this example, I have shown internet orders, internet sales. These are all the fact information. Okay, and not only this components, we can have calculated measures. Calculated measures are the ones that were created on the fly. That's called runtime. So here this calculator symbol represents it's a calculated measure. Calculated measure is the one that does not exist readily in the table, but we are deriving using existing data. So for example, let's say you have quantity and you have the price. So if you want to get the sales amount, you need to multiply quantity with the price, right? Then you get the sales amount. Okay. So that is about analysis services, and we talked about MDX. MDX is nothing but multidimensional expression language used to query the analysis services cube. Okay, so it is like a SQL like language where you write select statements, but the interpretation of select statement is different. I am hearing some sound. Somebody, I guess, can you please mute your microphone? Thank you. So sorry for that. MDX editor is used for writing multidimensional expression queries. So they are SQL like queries which are basically interpreted differently, though they look like SQL but they behave differently. Okay, but MDX is used to query analysis services cubes. Similarly, we talked yesterday that DAX is used to query the tabular model, right? DAX is used to query tabular model. MDX is used to query analysis services multidimensional model. Okay, so DAX is the new one. DAX is a new one that is introduced a couple of years back, and now the SQL Server has introduced a lot of functions in DAX, so it is also important to learn DAX. So once the analysis services is done, then the next thing left is the reporting tools. Reporting tools, as we discussed yesterday, we have SQL Server reporting services, we have Power BI, we have Power Pivot and Excel, right? Excel also can be used as a reporting tool. That means you can use Excel to browse a SQL table, or you can use Excel to browse analysis services multidimensional model, or you can use Excel to browse tabular model as well. So most of the users use Excel as a reporting tool because it is readily available and you don't need to build anything. You just need to open your empty Excel and connect to whichever you want. You can connect to SQL source or you can connect to multidimensional analysis services models. but SSRS is also there as a reporting tool. The difference between Excel and SSRS in terms of usage is reporting services is generally used for operational reporting. Operational reporting in the sense, let's say we discussed yesterday about order management system, right? So when we place orders, this order system will have transaction level information for the orders. How many orders are placed, what was the order placed at a given time, order number, order date, customer name, all those are transactional level information, right? You cannot put all the data into analysis services. As we talked before, analysis services is used for analytical purposes. Analytical purposes, when we use analysis services for analytical purposes, we are talking about aggregated information. How many orders were received last week? So that is an aggregation of all the orders received last week. So that kind of information will be mostly available in analysis services cubes, okay, or tabular models. Whereas let's say user wants to see what were those orders. So I say, like, let's say there are a million orders placed last week. So business, let's say business is interested to see what are those million orders. Then we use reporting services to show the transaction level information. So there is a distinction between the usage between for reporting services versus analysis services cubes. Cubes are mainly used for showing the aggregated information for analytical purposes. SQL reporting services are used for operational reporting. Operational reporting in the sense the detailed view of whatever the aggregation that cubes are doing. So to enable this together, what we can do is in analysis services cube, you show the aggregated data at week level, right? And if user wants to drill down into the day level information or the transaction level information, you can enable that capability within the analysis services. That means user may say right click and show the detailed report, and you can jump to the reporting services. So that is possible, okay. So the question, can't we use Excel to see the reports in operation view? So when we use Excel, you are writing a SQL query and connecting to the SQL table to see the transactional data, right? That is possible. But if you are talking about Excel, you need to put your SQL query in the Excel. So Excel is again your local notebook, right? So it won't be on the server. So every user, let's say there are 100 business users, all the business users Excel will have that query, right? So let's say you want to do some change in the query. So what happens? You need to do the change in all these 100 machines. Versus if you have reporting services stays on the server, and users use the browser, Internet Explorer or any other browser to connect to the server to see the reports. So if there is a change you need to make to the query, you will be making the query onto the server at one place. So once you make the change on the server, everyone, whoever is accessing that server to view the reports, will see the change. Whereas if you put in Excel, you can still do the operational reporting in Excel, but the problem is the Excel is in your local machine. So the query is also in your local machine. That means the query is in your notebook, Excel book. Any change to the query, you need to basically need to do the change in all the machines wherever that Excel workbook is. The other problem is also is permissions. So as a business user, I might not have access to production environment because production data is critical. So I cannot as a database administrator will not give access to production servers to all the users. Instead, if you have reporting services, we can use a special account to access to the database. So you give access to the users to the reporting server, not to the actual production server, right? So users will connect to the reporting server, but from there authentication happens with a different account, as a special account that is used to access the data warehouse system. So can you please repeat the difference between operational and transactional reporting? Both are same. Operational and transactional both give the operational information. Operational information in the sense the low level information, the transactional level data, that is operational. Whereas analytical reporting I was talking about. Analytical means it's aggregated report. So what was the sales happened last week? That's the analysis. So you want to do, let's say you want to do a trend analysis. How are the sales happening over the time? So each month, how is the sales? Is my sales growing or not? Right? To see that, you need the aggregate number. So let's say you want to see month by month comparison. So you want to see what is the sales last month and what is the sales this month, right? Then you will know, okay, my sales is doing good, but you don't want to go into the details to do the analysis. That is analytical reporting. Whereas transactional or operational reporting is, you basically say, okay, I have last month I had 100,000 orders, whereas this month I had only 1,000 orders. Okay, so then you get curious to see what happened last month. You got 100,000 versus 1,000 this month. So at that stage, you want to get into details. You want to go into order level and see what happened last month, what is happening this month. That is operational reporting. But analytical reporting is at high level. You are basically looking at the trend. How is the trend happening? How is the sales happening over a period? Maybe per month, or maybe sometimes we do yearly. What was the sales last year compared to what is the sales this year? That is analytical reporting. Operational or transactional reporting is, you go into the transactional level or a detailed level to see what is each transaction, the status of each transaction, and how each transaction is looking. Yeah, right. That is about SSRS. Similarly, we have Power BI. So Power BI is used for, again, analytical reporting. Analytical reporting in the sense, again, to do the trending. So mostly Power BI reports, as far as I seen, they are used for indicators. Indicators are KPIs. KPIs means how is the business doing. For example, let's say if my sales fall down to 1,000, I want to get alerted. Okay, if my sales is falling down below 1,000 orders per week, I want to get alerted. So that is called KPI. A threshold limit of 1,000 is defined as a KPI. If my my sales amount falls down below 1,000, I want to get alerted. That is the KPI. So you define those KPIs in Power BI. So you put a tile, you define basically that KPI to show how is the status. So as soon as you open a Power BI, you see green, 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 or red, yellow, those kind of things. Those are the indicators we use in the Power BI. Not only those, we have charts, we have even the tabular data as well. Tabular data means you can see the transactional information as well in Power BI, but that is not efficient in Power BI. Power BI is meant for, again, analytical and alerting mechanism. Okay, it's for analytical purposes. But the problem with Power BI is, you cannot change the access. That means if Power BI report is built to show you the sales amount by week, you cannot change it to show the sales amount by region. Okay, so whatever was built is the one you have to use, otherwise you need to rebuild a new one. Whereas in analysis services and Excel combination, you can change that. So let's say if I build a cube and give an Excel to the user, user can go and see the numbers per week or by the region or by both. So that flexibility is there with the user. User gets that flexibility in case of analysis services, but he won't get that flexibility with reporting services or with Power BI unless they are building their own reports. Okay, so that is about very high level introduction to business intelligence stack. So we saw how business intelligence looks, what is the purpose of business intelligence, and we saw the high level architecture structure, typical structure, how it looks, and we talk little bit about each technology or tool used in business intelligence applications. Okay, so give me 1 second. So SQL Server database concepts. So we finished the overall picture of business intelligence, and now we will talk about database concepts. So these are again going to be very theoretical, so we'll be talking about theory. This is important before we can jump into SQL syntaxes, writing queries and all those things, because without knowing these concepts, if you just get into the direct queries and all, it will be basically you need to understand why you are doing all those. Okay, so this whatever the theory we are going to talk will help you in understanding those when we do the queries and all. Okay,